Hello everyone, I'm Santiago, and today I'm gonna be doing a test with the i3-6100 paired with the RX 470 4GB using a 430 watt power supply with 34 amps on the 12 volt rail and 8 gigs of RAM, 2 sticks of 4 gigs, dual channel, and well, the XFX RX 470 RS. So let's start with Battlefield 1, 1080p, and I'm going to be using ultra settings with mesh quality on medium to help with the CPU usage on DirectX 12 mode. So now, as you will see, the game will be very unstable. You'll drop below 60 quite a lot, but I just found a match that was very demanding. I was lucky, so this one was very CPU intensive. You'll see a lot of drops below 60 that are very sudden. Then on the other half of the Battlefield 1 clip, you'll see that the drops are not as rough as the first section. So keep that in mind. You'll see that the GPU usage will fluctuate a lot. It drops to 0, back to 99% and 100. It's not the same as the NVIDIA cards. It fluctuates a lot more. So keep that in mind. It's not perfect, but I tested this with the i7 and it ran way more stable. So keep that in mind. The GPU usage stayed very close to 99% pretty much all the time on the i7 PC. If you get a better CPU, you get a better experience as always, but this is very playable. I have really nothing to complain about. Then CSGO, 1080p maximum settings with 2 times MSAA, because why not? And well, you'll see the GPU usage is very variable. It goes up to 80, then down to 40%, then 10%. That's because the GPU usage is variable. So as I said in the Battlefield 1 section of this video, it's not the same as the NVIDIA GPU usage shown on all the software. It fluctuates a lot more, so keep that in mind. It will go up to 100 and back to 5%, 0%, 50%, all that kind of stuff. So if you get a better CPU, you'll get better frame rates. In this case, you need a CPU with very high single-threaded performance. But overall, it's over 120 frames per second, so don't worry about it. It runs fine and it's very responsive. Then we have Doom, 1080p, TSS-AA, Vulkan, and we're using ultra settings with 16 times anisotropic filtering, which I forgot to enable. There you are. And well, let's try it out, shall we? So as you can see right now, we're over 60 frames per second and sometimes going over 100 frames, which is insane. It seems that Doom is just GPU intensive for the most part. The CPU is not really an issue in this game. As you can see, I'm not dropping below 60 at all, which is awesome. It might help that we're playing with Vulkan. With OpenGL it was worse, but well, AMD cards take advantage of Vulkan, so that's awesome. But yeah, this is the maximum I can go, and we are over 60 frames per second, no problem. So yeah, totally playable. Nothing to worry about. Now Fallout 4, 1080p, TAA, and I'm going to be using the Ultra preset. Only got raised from Ultra to low in order to take advantage of some extra frames to see if the CPU is a limiting factor. I also disabled VSync from the INI file in order to get a better understanding of how the game works. So as you can see now, Dem City, while looking into the distance, I'm below 60 frames per second. You'll see that sometimes the GPU usage is at 99%, then drops, then goes up. It's not really accurate for what I could see. Even with MSI Afterburner, I have problems because the AMD GPU usage detection is kinda different than NVIDIA's. It will just fluctuate a lot. You'll see that, like on many other games in this list, that the GPU usage will just go to 100, then 0, then 50, then 60, then 100, then 0. It's kind of weird how the GPU usage is displayed in AMD cards for what I could see with my experience with them. So if you're not using the card perfectly, it will just fluctuate the GPU usage. With the i7 on all the games, this didn't happen, but you see what I mean. If you look into the distance, you'll just get drops below 60. Then Forza Horizon 3, I'm going to show you the settings now. 1080p, as you can see, unlock frame rates. And well, let's see the advanced settings. We're using the Ultra preset with something lowered, the reflections from Ultra to high, and then the world car level of detail instead of Ultra on low. So that helps with the CPU usage, or what I could see, to make the game more stable. And as you can see, I'm using the RX 470 and the i3 6100 with 8 gigs of RAM on dual channel. And you can see there the task manager to see how all the things are doing. And I'm using the Xstory to see the frame rate. So this is the same as playing on full screen. The game is running at 1080p, so don't worry about that. It's just cramming all the pixels in a very small place. Nothing really to worry about. So as you can see there, I'm below 60 frames per second. And again, as you can see on the GPU usage at the right, it's at 0%, then 10, then we'll go to 100, then we'll go down again, just like we saw on file 4. That's Bottleneck. Again, the CPU is limiting the GPU. This game in particular is not really that well optimized, so people are having issues even with higher end CPUs. But I'll test this game later with a better CPU to confirm that. But yeah, as you can see, we cannot get 60 frames per second constant. There are a lot of cars on screen. We are in the city area that runs awful. But if we go into open areas, the game runs much better. I managed to get 65 frames per second outside the city without any racers with me. Then with racers it drops to 50, but it wasn't stable at all. So my suggestion is just cap the game at 30 frames per second and you'll be fine. The frame pacing in this game at 30 frames is perfect. Now Dying Light, 1080p, I don't know if you can see that. Very high settings with some stuff turned off, like depth of field from NVIDIA and NVIDIA PCSS shadows. And the view distance at 50%. And as you can see, there we have 60 frames, then 58, we're dropping below 60. So to fix that is very easy, just lower the view distance. I like to keep it at 10 to 20% since the performance difference is huge and the game looks almost the same. As you can see now we're above 60 without an issue. So let's now just jump down there. If you have a better CPU, you'll get better frame rates anyway with better view distances too. So keep that in mind. The GPU usage here is fine. As you can see, we're at 100%. It might drop a little bit, but it's not as drastic as the other games. This one was patched very well. Now it's not using as much CPU as it used to. So yes, you can see this one is totally fine. We are above 60 frames. There we got a drop in the GPU usage, but still, there is bottleneck here, but the frame rate is totally fine. We're above 60, so it's actually good to go. Assassin's Creed Unity 1080p. I'm going to be using the highest setting, but the NVIDIA features I'm going to be completely turned off. As you can see, there are the shadows. Instead of PCSS shadows, I'm using high, And instead of HBAO plus, I'm using SSAO. So keep that in mind. I'm going to jump down. I had a ton of issues with this game with the 1050 Ti to maintain 60s. And as you can see here, we have the same problem. But now we are above 50 frames per second. This is very fluid. You cannot really see it, but that's how it is. And as you can see, it's just fluctuating a lot. The GPU usage will do the same every now and then. As I said before, just get a better CPU and you'll be fine. Nothing to worry about there. But yeah, so far the game is totally playable. We are getting just drops below 60 but not below 30. In my opinion, that's what matters. As long as the game doesn't drop below 30 or 40 frames, I'm fine with it. So in this case, as you can see, we are totally fine. We're about 40 frames per second and there are a lot of NPCs on screen. We're all that kind of stuff. So yeah, this one is playable. Batman Arkham Knight, I'm going to do 1080p, maximum settings except level of detail, which is on low. You might be asking why. That's because in the description on the right it says that it uses CPU too. So that means that it affects the CPU. So let's keep it on low. It helped me a lot with the performance. So I'm going to drive a little bit and then fight and fly around. I'm not tired of repeating it. The GPU usage would just fluctuate a lot. That's because of the CPU, limited in the GPU. If you get a better CPU, you won't have this issue. So keep that in mind. If you want a better experience, just cap it at 30 frames per second. That will allow you to get a more stable frame rate, since the CPU usage will be much lower. It seems to use a lot of RAM. It can take advantage of 12 gigabytes according to the developers, which is ridiculous, but anyway. It also needs a fast drive, so if you have an SSD, I suggest you install the game there to avoid most of the stutters. But yeah, the game is playable so far. Again, my suggestion, cap it at 30 frames per second.
There he is! It's Batman!
GTA 5 1080p with some tweaks here and there. I'll be using very high settings, but the reflections instead of ultra will be on very high, and the grass will be also on very high instead of ultra, with softest shadows, and the rest turned on. All the advanced graphics will be turned off, as you can see. Well, this one uses a lot of CPU as always, but as you can see, when I'm on the street just destroying cars, we are at 60 frames per second, but we'll get drops here and there. The problem with this game, again, it uses a lot of CPU. When you're flying around, it's the most noticeable moment when the frame rate just gets destroyed. It can be dropped to 40 frames per second at the lowest I saw. But it's just for a moment. It's not really that annoying. If you are, I don't know, you come from a console or something like that, it will be much more fluid, which is awesome. But still, this uses a lot of CPU. As you can see, the GPU usage, again, like in the other games, I won't be tired of repeating this, just fluctuates a lot. As you can see, it's at 100%, then we go down to 90, 50, 60, 30, 40. That's how you know that your CPU is limiting your GPU. As you can see, if you get a better CPU, this won't happen. Example, I have an i7 4790. I put this game with this card, I played a little bit like I'm doing right now, and the game just stayed at over 80 frames per second, no issues. And the GPU usage was at 99 and 100% all the time without going down, just to get a better CPU if you worry about this. Now Hitman, I'm going to be doing 1080p and the maximum settings. This is on the DirectX 12 mode. so we take advantage of some extra frames that our card can offer. I'm going to be testing Marrakesh, which is the map with most NPCs on a single place. That means more CPU usage. And as you can see now, we are over 30 frames per second, but as you can see, the GPU usage, as I told you before, it just fluctuates a ton. That's due to the CPU. If you want 60 frames per second on this game, you'll need an i5 from Haswell or Skylake or Kaby Lake if you want to be close to 60 frames per second. But I'm just going to lower the draw distance or level of detail to show you that that's not the issue, but it helps with the CPU usage a little bit. And as you can see, I got like 3 frames more. Not really something to take much of in account, but it's good. Now I'm going to lower the settings to medium, pretty much, to show you that the problem is the CPU, not the GPU. So we just lower some stuff. We turn shadows to medium, the resolution of the shadows to medium too. We turn off ambient occlusion. And as you can see now, we are still at 50 frames. We're not hitting 60 anytime soon. And here we drop to 45 again, like when I lowered the draw distance. So yeah, problem with the CPU. Get a better one if you want more frames. Just Cause 3, I will do in 1080p with everything on the maximum except level of detail factor that will be on medium to help with the CPU usage, which I found to be kind of useful in this case. But yeah, this game is very CPU intensive, so I'm just going to be flying and then exploding some gas stations, which usually kills the frame rate. But as you can see now, the frame rate is kind of unstable, and the GPU usage, again, like on the previous games, just fluctuates a ton. Again, the CPU, if you use an i7 or an i5, you won't have this issue. But yeah, I mean, this game is playable, but I suggest capping it at 30 frames per second if possible. That will make it stutter much less. But as you can see there, I'm exploding the gas station. And when it explodes, it just drops below 40 frames. But yeah, something to keep in mind. Just get a better CPU or cap the game at 30 frames, and that will make it more stable.
Rebel hostage inside. Hijack the car and get them to safety.
This is dispatch. Target is still at large. Find him. We've lost him. Get back to your posts.
Now Overwatch 1080p, and I'm going to be using the maximum settings. As you will see now, everything on the maximum. Even the reflections will be on high instead of off or medium like on my previous videos. But yeah, as you can see there, ultra settings, no problems whatsoever. So as you can see now, we are getting over 60 frames per second, no problem. This game is not CPU intensive at all. It's just more of a GPU bound game. As you can see, I'm over 80 frames, no problem. And the GPU usage stays at 100%, 90 to 100%. It doesn't fluctuate like on the other games. That's because it doesn't use that much CPU. So yeah, on this one you don't have anything to worry about. It runs totally fine. Now The Witcher 3, I'm going to be doing 1080p with a mix between high and ultra. Shadows, grass, foliage visibility range will be on high instead of ultra. And on the post-processing presets, I have some stuff turned on, some off. And I'm going to go into Novigrad. So first, I'm here outside the city. As you can see, we're over 60 frames per second, no problem. This is more of a GPU-bound area, but the city is more CPU-bound. So when we're getting closer and closer to Novigrad, the CPU usage will be higher and higher. That will make the GPU usage to be lower. So that will make us drop below 60 frames per second or get some stutters every now and then. But so far it was way more stable than I expected. As you can see, we're over 60, but we get some drops every now and then below 60 that are kind of noticeable but not annoying. As you can see there, we had one. I mean, it's just into the city. I don't see it like a deal breaker. This is just when you're just walking here. If you're just standing on a place or fighting some people, it doesn't really drop like here, since we're moving and just loading new assets. So yeah, in my opinion, this one runs totally fine. If you want to play it, this is a great build to do so, and the game looks amazing.
Come on now.
And finally, Rainbow Six Siege. I'm going to be doing 1080p and the maximum settings except textures. Instead of using ultra textures with the texture pack, which uses 6 gigs of VRAM, I'm going to be using very high. And for ambient occlusion, HBAO Plus with temporal filtering. And as you can see, this game is not really a problem for this build at all. As you can see, the GPU usage stays at pretty much 70 to 100%. And we're getting over 90 frames per second. I mean, we're over 60 all the time. I had no problems with this game at all. So yeah, I mean, this one is a big recommendation from me if you like multiplayer tactical games. But yeah, it ran totally fine. I had no problems with this one. So yeah, conclusion, this is not a bad build. Most games that use a lot of CPU will have problems like stuttering, but that won't allow the game to be unplayable. The game will still be totally playable, as you could see on all the games I tested, even Hitman that uses a lot of CPU. The one that was pretty much a deal breaker for me was Just Cause 3, since we have to cap it at 30 like Batman Arkham Knight. But so far, I mean, it's not bad at all. You can get a better CPU later and you have a much better experience. So you're actually getting a good GPU, a decent CPU, but you can get a better CPU later, like an i5 or an i7. This has a big upgrade path. You can even get a Kaby Lake processor later on. This motherboard is compatible with Kaby Lake 2, so you have a big upgrade path. But yeah guys, that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching and see you next time.